I'm Ryan Stevens.
Dr. Taylor Waters.
I'm Ben Oliver.
Welcome to the Superhuman Show, yeah?
Welcome everyone to the Superhuman Show with myself, Ben Oliver, and fellow coach Ryan Stevens and Dr. Taylor Waters. So the topic of discussion today is going to be paralysis by analysis, where there is so much information out there now regarding nutrition, training, supplements, hormones, and I think it tends to stop people from even starting the process and just ends up in a long-term procrastination without getting any results. So let's talk about nutrition first. What are some of the things that you see online, Taylor, which you found that have just seemed to confuse people? We'll talk about fat loss for starters. What are the things that you read or see, or that you have clients talk to you about that has led them to procrastinate and not get any results before they've started working with you?
Well, I think before we got on the podcast now, we were talking about the internet, isn't it? And how it provides so much information. And that's one of the good things, but then it's also one of the bad things as well. It provides too much information. And it's very difficult to then decipher what works and what doesn't. And when you think about fitness being the business that it is, everyone needs to reinvent the wheel in order to sell it. So what you've got the initial product of nutrition, and then someone gets it, tries to sell it, so they dress it up as a different package. And then the next person dresses up again. And that's been going on for the past 10, 20, 30 years. And now what happens, you've got this wheel that's being reinvented so much that it's now no longer the wheel. So when everyone's trying to process all these different pieces of information that then conflict back and forth as well. So you literally get two dietary strategies, both giving the complete opposite information, and someone's now got to interpret that and apply it to themselves. So what you find is they're so confused before they even start anything. They just sort of delay that start process because they don't know where to start.
And so we've all come from academic backgrounds. Yours in behavior, mine in nutrition, Ryan's, yours in strength and conditioning. When you work with clients, Ryan, starting their nutrition process, you get it a lot where they might say, I want to try X. Like, let's say I want to try doing this while being a vegan, or I want to do the carnivore diet, or something that they've read for some reason. What are the first questions that you would then ask that client before? Because we know as a coaching strategy, it's not a good idea to just crap on the idea from the start, because you're still trying to build rapport and figure out the why behind the client. So when someone presents that to you, what are the kind of strategies that you would use with them to maybe go a different route to get them the results that they're after?
Yeah, I think you make a really good point there, because as we know, there's no special thing about one strategy. But I think if you automatically call that strategy out, you're just going to butt heads with the client. And like you said, you really need to build a rapport when you first start off. So the first thing I would say is, like, why do you want to do that diet? And I'll talk about the positives of that particular diet, because there will be some positives to it. And I think if you start to lean on the positives first and say, okay, well, whatever the strategy is, you say, okay, well, these are the positive of it. We can try that. Start with that. I think it's really important that you start there. And over time, you start to bring in, okay, well, maybe why don't we try this approach instead? Or sort of interlink. So let's say, for example, if someone wants to do the ketogenic diet, then maybe you say all the benefits of the ketogenic diet, what's good about it. And over time, as you start to work with the client, and more importantly, build the rapport with the client, then you say, okay, well, why don't we think about adding in some carbohydrates in this example? And you start slowly adding carbohydrates in all the time, rather than just saying, oh, no, that's rubbish. We're now going to go dump in loads of carbohydrates at once, because then you're just going to butt heads. Okay, so it's like, okay, we'll start with the ketogenic diet and slowly add carbohydrates in over time as you build rapport with the client and say, okay, well, these are the benefits of carbohydrates. These are what these bring to the table as well as a ketogenic approach. And then that's how you start to get a more balanced approach, I guess.
Yeah, I think one thing which is hard for clients to understand is, one, if they don't come from a academic background, they don't really know how to read a research article. And so it can be really common where you see an article online, whether it's men's health, men's fitness, T-Nation was a classic one that I used to read. And there'd be a bunch of PubMed references posted. and you'd click on the link and you'd read a quick abstract about a supplement or something, but you never actually read the study. And, maybe the first 2 words are in vitro, which we know means, well, it was done in test tubes, which has no relevance to humans. But then they're going to try implementing this supplement or routine because, there's research. And so it's far more nuanced than there's been studies on this isn't an argument to necessarily do something, I think.
Sorry.
No, carry on.
I was thinking, the thing is as well with nutrition is everyone, and literally, because everyone eats, so everyone has an opinion on the best way to eat. And even to the degree where, people are given, no one asks them for nutrition advice, yet you'll have some random person online giving their version of their diet. And it's like, it doesn't, like, how does that apply to anyone? But then whoever's watching that and whoever follows them, especially if they have some level of influence, like that's not what they're followed for. They're followed because they might have, they might be attractive or they've done some other physical feat, yet they're given their nutrition advice, and now their nutrition advice is taken as if it's good information. And it's like I remember competing, I prepped for a show, and I was in my final few days before a show, and my dad's wife, not my mother, my dad's wife was giving me nutrition advice for what I should be eating in the run up to the show. And I was like, I've done like 24 weeks preparation for this show, and now I've got this like 55-year-old woman just telling me how to finish off this diet phase because no fitness knowledge, no fitness background, no nutrition knowledge, but suddenly I know how to eat. She raises her hand and decides to step in. So it's like, even to that degree, everyone has a say in the way you should or shouldn't eat. So not only are you getting information from, say, scientists and researchers, then you're getting recommendations from personal trainers, then you're getting recommendations from nutritionists, then from Dave the plumber, then from your nan, and now everyone's giving you nutrition. And it's like, where do I even start here? It's such a, again, it's because everyone eats, suddenly everyone's got an opinion on it. And it's like, well, not everyone's opinion really matches up the same.
It's one of those fields where it's almost like if you have experience in nutrition, or you study nutrition, it doesn't seem to gain the same respect as like, let's say medicine or something, in that, like you said, like a great story. My aunt, every time she'd come around, it would be a new diet fad that she's doing, and she's the expert on it. And I would just nod my head. And so I thought I'd play a game. And so she baked. She was an incredible baker. And I started talking about baking cakes like I was an expert. And I'd say, no, you don't want to use self-raising flour. You need to use this flour. And it riled her up. And she'd go mad. That's so stupid. And I said, every time you mention nutrition, that's how I feel inside. Yeah. And then it finally sunk into her, like, I don't actually know what I'm talking about, but I just read these magazines, and it's so common. Yeah. But I think what we're trying to get at is, you said this, Ryan, if there was a certain number of books that you could read and it would prevent you from eating anything.
I can't remember what the books were or where I saw it, but it was like 5 different books. And if you read each one of those books, there would be nothing left for you to eat. Because like Taylor said at the start, they all conflict each other. They're all the best approach, but they're all conflicting. So if you read them all and you believed that book was the best way to go, and then you read this one, you would then believe that one. You would have, by the end of those 5 books, there would be nothing left to eat. So like maybe it's not one size fits all. It's not one extreme approach. There's got to be a balance to it. And I often find when all this information is thrown at these people, they just get overwhelmed and end up doing nothing. Because like Taylor said, they just don't know where to start.
And I think what you said there was spot on as well. When you said there's not one size that fits all, and there isn't. Like there's some universal parts of nutrition which they are, you cannot escape them in terms of an energy deficit, in terms of this type of stuff. And you cannot escape that. But how you achieve that over long periods of time, there actually is no one size fits all. Yeah. You can take certain elements of different dietary approaches, and they will all work for certain individuals. And I think that's what people don't get, is just because something worked for them, they then think, well, that's how it should be done. And it's like, no, there is no, like, I remember reading a paper, and that was one of the key sentences that stuck out. And it was like, there is no one size fits all. I can't remember the paper off the top of my head, but yeah, that was one of the things that always stuck out to me.
Playing on that one size fits all as well, when people have like these extreme approaches, they are missing the actual fundamentals of what is getting the results. So let's say it's fat loss, it's like a caloric deficit, but they will say, for example, intermittent fasting is the best, or ketogenic diet is the best. But all they're doing is removing food groups. If it's a ketogenic diet, if it's intermittent fasting, you're closing the eating window, so you're likely to eat less, okay? But they don't tell the person why it's happening. They just say, ketogenic diet's the best, buy my book. You know, they're not actually saying the fundamentals. So it's because you're making progress on this diet. It's because you're eating less, you're consuming less calories. Therefore, you're making progress because of that. And going on the one size fits all is like, well, okay, if we know the fundamentals of, in this example, fat loss, then we can design an approach that fits you and your lifestyle. It may be keto. It may be high carbohydrate diet. It may be a mixture of both. And that's how you start to work with the client and find what integrates into their lifestyle and what suits their preferences. And you only get that from building a rapport.
And that's what makes a good coach. A good coach needs to develop an understanding about the individual as a unique individual and then build the approach around that. Whereas when you're trying to sell something, that's not what sells. You need to sound something that grips people's attention. You tell them what they want to hear. So now there's that sort of conflict where you're not actually, it's hard to package that up and sell it. And that's why the wheel gets reinvented so many times. And that's why the marketing, it all skews everyone's interpretation of what nutrition actually is.
Yeah, I mean, with Superhuman, one, I think we've done a very good job of, we've not pigeonholed ourselves with certain nutritional training biases, in that we don't say we take a low carb approach or we're high carb guys or keto, in that you could look at our clients and every single one of them has got a different style of eating to suit their travel schedule, their work schedule, their personal preferences. And on paper, that might look like a keto diet or a carnivore diet, but there's a rhyme and a reason behind it. And we were talking about this earlier, where this is where research and real life evidence starts to kind of get a bit gray, in that you cannot take research and apply it to someone because they're not a robot. In that you can do all the research and try and build the most optimal plan, but that has no relevance when it comes to working with an individual that has their own preconceived biases about nutrition, their own personal preferences, life stresses, a career, a family, all of these things. In that you see it so many times where we spend ages on a perfect training program and then someone's like, oh, I don't like that exercise. And it's like, right, well, that goes out the window. Then it's a suboptimal program. But the most optimal program is one that someone can actually stick to and enjoys for a long period of time, or they can stick to for the desired period to get the outcome. Because I don't like and I've changed my tune on this, because it used to be, if you can't see yourself doing it in a year, you shouldn't be doing it. And to an extent, I agree, but also you shouldn't be dieting forever. So you can't diet forever. Therefore, a diet is unsustainable long term. So it needs to be sustainable for the period to get the desired outcome. And then you will switch to maintenance or whatever is more sustainable. But you have to look at it in the sense of what's the most practical way to get the result in the desired time frame, if it's reasonable.
Yeah, it's got to be the approach has to suit the individual at that current time within that current context as well. It's going to be all different. There's different times of their life when a certain dietary behavior might suit them. So it's like you need to find the right approach for the right person at the right time. And it's like you don't. Yeah, it's on like your point. It's hard because I try and avoid saying like that whole one size fits all. I try and avoid saying like that's definitely the best way, because someone who says, oh, you should be able to do it for 3 years. And it's like, but again, you're doing the same thing there. You're applying this saying that should apply to everyone. And there's never going to be something outside of, again, the universal fundamentals. Because, for example, like, cheat meals, that term, for example, comes out. And people say, oh, I don't like saying cheat meals because it may cause negative emotions around food and things. But then there are people on this planet who have said that for decades and it doesn't bother them at all. And they've actually had a very successful diet in life, and they've got a very good relationship with food. So everyone always tries to paint everyone with the same brush, and what you'll find is there is actually nothing that you can paint across everyone. And that's where the skill of a coach comes in, is being able to look at the individual and then know what brushes to use for this unique person.
Yeah, I think it was Christian Thibodeau. He came out with basically like training for your body type, or like fiber makeup or something. But really it was more like personality type, which I quite liked, in that if someone has very like a short attention span, then their training is likely going to change a bit more frequently to accommodate that preference for them, and that they like to mix things up. But it's, again, striking that balance of, we know mixing things up too much, you're not really going to get any desired results, because you can't, it's very hard to track progression. But then also, if I try and have this guy do the same routine for the next 12 weeks, he's going to quit because he gets bored. And so like, I would say nutrition and training is far more down to the personality and behavior type, as opposed to any saliva swab or blood test or whatever random crap that people are doing these days to like eat, you know, what are they called? The Noom things, measuring your blood sugar all day. Like, there's zero evidence that does anything or changes behavior. So it's getting a bit silly now, but I can totally empathize with people that are truly in pain and want to change their lifestyle, but they are truly paralyzed by, like, I don't know who to follow or who to trust.
Yeah.
Yeah, what I was going to say is, like, what it really comes down to is, I think a lot of people try and think of like what the optimal plan is on paper rather than what is the optimal plan for that person. And those two things may not correlate. It may, like, I've wrote some training programs and give some nutrition advice, and on paper I'm like, oh God, like, if someone read that and they didn't have the context,
They think you're an idiot.
Yeah, they think I was an idiot. It's like, who give you this? Like Taylor's mum, you know? But it's like,
My dad's girlfriend.
Dad's girlfriend, that's the one, yeah.
I'm my mum's class.
However, like I've given a training program before, like some emergency services worker, like working really long hours, family, didn't have time to go to the gym. And it's like, okay, from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to bed, you're going to do 100 push-ups across the day and 100 squats. That's your training plan. Okay, very suboptimal on paper if you read that. However, this fitted this person's lifestyle, and they were moving in the direction that they wanted to go. So it's like, okay, this person has found something that works for them that they can stick to. May not be ideal, but at least they're moving in the direction they want to go. And that's the most important thing. Because the reality is, if I planned a 4-day week in the gym, they'd probably they wouldn't last a week. You know, they physically said, I've got a family, I can't make it to the gym, but I can do this. It's like, okay. And like, as we always say, this stuff operates on a continuum, doesn't it? It's like, okay, ideally they would go in the gym. We can't do that. What's the next best thing we can do? Like, what can we do?
Work your way down.
Work your way down.
Yeah. I think from a coaching standpoint, if you've acquired all this knowledge over years, you know, maybe you've studied academically and you've got a degree or a master's or a PhD like Dr. Taylor. I think if you're not careful as a coach, though, you can let your ego get the best of you, and you're trying to showcase your knowledge too much, which really isn't helping anyone, in that you're trying to, you've just learned about periodization and all these, quirky nutrition things and nutrient timing. And then you try and build this amazing plan. And then, you're working with Karen, who just needs to go for a 30-minute walk in the morning and love herself a bit more, and have a friend. And so, I learned this as a personal trainer. I thought everyone wanted to just be jacked and tanned, and I train everyone pretty much the same way.
They do.
Yeah.
Whoever says they don't align.
But I quickly realized that a few of my clients, they genuinely just liked spending time out of their normal routine and having someone to talk to. Like, it was like the time between sets they valued more than the actual work. And then it completely changed my view of personal training, that it turned more into kind of like what we do at Supra. It's like, it's personal development. It's not just like, yes, you get lean, you change your body composition, but to say that you do that without developing any, mindset shifts, belief changes, and things like that would be silly, because that it all goes hand in hand. But if you had to, if you've got that person that say, I'm just stuck, like, I don't know where to start, what's your first piece of advice that you would give them just to get them going?
It depends what the context of their goal is. So give me a more.
So let's just say someone is 30 pounds overweight, wants to drop body fat, and they're reading things like they need to eat carnivore, but then they'll read someone that will say veganism is going to be the way, and it's going to detox and cleanse, and meat's bad for you. Then you've got the intermittent fasting, like Ryan said, keto, like all of these things, and they don't know what's best, and this is leading them to not even start anything. What's the first thing that you would say to that person?
Well, I think I like to sit people down, and when you look at behavior change techniques, one of the techniques you use is enhancing knowledge and understanding. So what I like to sit down and really explain how fat loss is achieved, just almost like explaining like an energy balance equation to them. Because once they start to understand, then they will believe it a little bit more. Whereas because they don't know what to believe. Because again, there's so much stuff being thrown at them. But when you explain how simple the laws of thermodynamics are, and you don't have to explain it in very much detail, you just basically run through the energy balance equation, and then they start to take a bit of note. Okay, that now makes sense. If you can take something that's relatively complex when you look at it in very much detail, and this is where that sort of thing where academics can sometimes struggle, is they because they understand so much, they try and speak that way to the layman. Whereas it's just like when you get the tech guy come over your house with your computer and he starts telling you about your computer, and you're looking at him like, what is he talking about? Like, and you just go, you're just nodding, and I say, yeah, that's fine, just fix it and I'll pay you. But no, so I like to sit down and really explain in essence what they are trying to do. And once they actually start to develop that, and that now increases their confidence to start following that direction now. Because what they've done is there's all these paths. They've looked at 10 different paths, and now they've looked down one path and they can see the lights on down this path. They can see, okay, this path is making the most sense to me. It's leading in the direction that I want to go. So now I'll start going that way, because they're again, it's just enhancing that knowledge and understanding is enough for them to have some buy-in and at least start walking. And then once they've started walking, now you start to trip, and now you start to figure out the rest. But until you actually start, I think that's a really good way to get them started, is just running through a little bit more about how this thing works in general, and then they get that little bit more buy-in.
Yeah,
I like that. What would your first thing be, Ryan?
So just going off what Taylor would say, so I'd always try and like enhance their knowledge. So then once you get that base, so like in your example where it's like they think this one's bad, this one's really good, like when you actually, like what we said earlier, where these people are trying to sell something, they're almost like keeping yourself at arm's reach. They're not actually telling you why you aren't making progress. So in this case, dropping 30 pounds is an energy balance equation. So if you actually enhance their knowledge, then they can actually see, okay, well, maybe these things aren't bad. And then you can say, okay, well, now you have a little bit more knowledge on why you may have not lost that 30 pounds just yet. You say, okay, now let's start where you are. Let's start walking. Let's see what you currently do. Do you do a more ketogenic diet approach? Is those foods something you like? Let's collect data and find out. And when you start moving, then you either start winning or you're learning. You may be like, oh, I don't like doing that. It's like, okay, well, we have a lot of options. Like there's no good or bad foods in this case, because we've enhanced their knowledge, as Taylor said. So once you get that base knowledge, and then we say, okay, let's start collecting data on what you currently do on a daily basis, we can find out what your preferences are, and we can start to tweak week by week.
I think it can fall into that kind of, people use that perfectionist mentality as a excuse to not start, in that they're waiting to find the perfect path rather than just walking. And I would joke with one of our other coaches, Jose, who he used to coach for NCI, training coaches, awesome guy. And we would say, and he would use this with his clients, and I'm going to say he got it from me just to take the credit. But so one of the things that he would say to his students was, okay, you've got a 200-pound male, 35 years old, sedentary, goal is to lose 20 pounds. What's your starting numbers, when it comes to like setting a starting plan? And they would all come out with their different, they would use like a Harris-Benedict formula, or they'd use, well, they need 1 gram per pound of protein and all these things. And, they would go around, and he's like, well, you're all right, because you didn't say anything that was just completely out there. But he goes, here's what you do. He's like, you throw shit at a wall and see what sticks. In that the starting plan really is irrelevant. You just need to start and collect data and make notes. If you don't know whether to do carnivore, keto, fasting, vegan, try one, see how you feel, make notes, be objective about it, not just emotional, and then say, well, yeah, I don't really like this because X, Y, and Z, this didn't work very well. Why do you not think it didn't work very well? And that's where you can have that conversation about energy balance and things. Try a different approach. And eventually you'll try all of them, which we've all done, and this is why I think when we have these clients that come to us like this, we're quite passionate to kind of just nip it in the bud, because we've wasted 5 years of our training career trying all this dumb shit. And we're like, let me save you the 5 years and frustration, and just get you off and, get you down a path which is reasonable, and then they quickly realize like, okay, and sometimes they'll do that crazy shit anyway. And you're like, well, you're going to figure it out for yourself. But it seems to be a very common thing. Again, people will come into our program and we hear it all the time. Like, I think this works really well for my body, says the 300-pound man. And it's like, well, you're not Bill Kazmaier, so I don't think that 300 pounds is muscle. And so it's like, okay, well, first we need a bit of an ego check and say like, is it working for you? Is your goal to be 300 pounds of mashed potato?
Okay, even that opinion, isn't it? It's that
totally.
He's coming with his own opinion on what works best for him, yet he's come to you for help. But if you've already figured it out, why are you here? You've solved the problem, apparently. Obviously, they haven't, hence why they're there. But again, it's strange how he's still got that opinion on what works best for him when he clearly doesn't even know yet.
All the evidence is stacked against him that approach does not work for him, but he feels it does in this example.
And that's an ego thing. Like, and I think as coaches, your job is to have those conversations, and sometimes they are hard conversations because people have been trying to solve this thing for themselves for 20 years and haven't cracked it. And then you show them this really simple approach, and it's almost like a slap in the face of like, I've been studying my ass off for 20 years to find the perfect thing, and you're just telling me to eat less and walk more. You're an idiot. Meanwhile, you have clients that come in with no ego and say, I'm at a loss with this stuff. Just point me in the right direction. And they follow everything to a T. They're 40 pounds down, in 15 weeks. They feel amazing. What did you have them do? Eat a little bit less, move a little bit more in a way that suits their lifestyle, maybe throw in a bit of resistance training, and they're good to go. So it's an extremely simple approach, which probably hurts our egos because, we spent the money at university to work out all this fancy crap. And then you realize you could learn the nutrition in a day. You really just need to learn people, which takes years and years and years to get good at and to be able to build that rapport.
And that's what a coach, isn't it? A good coach is not someone who knows the most. There's a lot more smart people out there who just can't. A coach is someone who can get the most out of people. That is someone who's very good. I always look at Alex Ferguson was obviously from a football background or a soccer background, depending on who you're watching. And it's like the thing that they said about him, he was the best at getting the most out of the people. Although he's a manager coach, and he's in that sort of senior position. And that's what you always find. Like, you can take the same team, you can take someone who's got way more, theoretical knowledge, and they'll try and apply that to the team and they just don't get it. And that's where a coach is really good. They're very good at developing an understanding of that person and then selecting the right strategies to get the most out of that person then. Both from a theoretical standpoint, but from an emotional standpoint, and sometimes coaches and clients don't actually match up just because they don't. But that's where being the smartest person, and you'll notice that because the level of knowledge that it takes from a nutritional standpoint to help people actually get to their goals isn't overly advanced. There's some stuff that is a bit more advanced than others, and having some more in-depth knowledge puts you in a strong position. However, you don't need super in-depth knowledge from a nutrition standpoint to get the most out of people. And that's where you see it a lot, especially from academic backgrounds. You see some really smart guys, and then you put them in the real world setting where they've got to try and get something out of people, and it all falls apart.
Yeah. I think that's where I learned the most, like working on the gym floor when I first started, is like you can learn all this theory like in university. It's like putting that into practice and getting like real results with real humans is a skill. And that's like where on the gym floor, you're just constantly learning like how to communicate with people. Because like I said, like, we have this knowledge. Like, I will try and say it to the client in the most simple way possible. I won't give them too much information, just enough to get them from A to B. I'd only give them my explanation if they ask for it. They'd be like, oh, why are we doing this? Because there's always a reason behind something that we say. We always make a decision. There's always a reason. But unless they ask for it, we don't need to overwhelm them with that knowledge, because again, it'll just like overwhelm them even more essentially,
Yeah. I think the, two things to take away from this episode that you can take action now will be, one, you can, and we spoke about this earlier, find someone that's been in a similar situation to yourself, that's overcome the obstacle or solved the problem that you're trying to solve, either with themselves or with multiple people. So they've got evidence that they've done it several times. That, that's probably going to be a good person to start with. And if you don't have that luxury, choose something and stick with it. I would say for at least 2 to 3 months and be objective and make notes. And if you're not seeing the results that you desire, look at the feedback that you've given yourself, and then try a different approach. And through trial and error, you will eventually get there.
Yeah, I think important on that is, again, collect objective data. Because it can be an emotional ride for some people, and emotions can really skew your interpretation of what is actually going on here. So make sure that you are collecting good data, and then you can make an informed decision with what's actually going on. So people start something and then they're getting too emotional about it. They get tied up, and then they sort of change angle again, and then they end up in that sort of cycle where they're changing direction, and they never actually get anywhere.
That's where a coach comes in handy, because they can analyze the data and collect it for you. It takes the emotion out of it.
Streamlines the whole process.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
100%.
Well, thanks guys for tuning in for this episode. Be sure to like and subscribe us on YouTube, and we'll see you next time.